The Queen's horror begins. The alien queen sat on her grand throne, her many eyes fixed on the giant screen before her. The dark chamber was filled with her most trusted generals, scientists, and advisors. The air was tense. They were watching a live transmission from a distant planet, a world recently invaded by the humans. The Queen had seen countless battles in her lifetime. She had conquered hundreds of planets, wiped out entire species, and crushed rebellions without mercy. But today, she felt something unusual. She felt unease. The screen showed a vast jungle. The sky was dark, filled with swirling red clouds. Trees taller than mountains swayed in the wind. The ground trembled as something enormous moved through the shadows. Then it appeared. A dreadfang. A beast of pure nightmare. It stood over 20 feet tall, covered in thick black scales. Its 4 glowing red eyes burned like fire. Its claws could tear through the strongest metals. Its tail could crush a tank with a single swing. It had destroyed entire armies before. Even the Queen's most elite warriors feared this monster. And yet, there they were. The humans. A small group of human soldiers stood in the clearing, their weapons raised. They looked tiny compared to the dreadfang. Weak, fragile. Their soft skin and thin bodies should have been torn apart in seconds. The Queen smiled. Foolish creatures. They do not understand their mistake. The dreadfang roared, shaking the ground. Its acid-dripping fangs snapped forward, ready to devour the humans whole. The chamber was silent. The Queen leaned forward, waiting for the slaughter to begin. And then, something impossible happened. The humans didn't run. They didn't scream. They didn't even look afraid. Instead, one of them, a soldier with a scar on his cheek, grinned. The dreadfang lunged. The humans moved. Fast. The first human rolled to the side, dodging the monster's deadly claws. Another human leaped onto a rock and fired his weapon, not at the dreadfang's head, but at its legs. A third human pulled out a glowing blade and sliced through the beast's tail in one swift motion. The dreadfang screeched in pain. It tried to fight back, but the humans were everywhere, moving too fast, striking too precisely. Within seconds, the mighty predator, the apex killer of this planet, was on the ground. And then, the humans did something unbelievable. They started a fire. The Queen's many eyes blinked. What are they doing? A general, standing nearby, whispered, "My Queen." "I think they are cooking it." The Queen's body stiffened. Impossible. But it was true. The humans butchered the dreadfang like it was nothing more than an animal. They skinned it, carved its flesh, and placed chunks of meat over the flames. One of them pulled out spices, a bright yellow powder, and sprinkled it onto the sizzling meat. Another human cut the roasted flesh into strips and handed them out to his squad mates. A soldier took a bite. He chewed thoughtfully. Then he nodded. "Tastes like chicken." The chamber erupted in chaos. The Queen's generals hissed and chittered in horror. The scientists clutched their data tablets, unable to process what they were seeing. The warriors shook their heads in disbelief. The dreadfang was supposed to be unstoppable. A terror so great that no species in the galaxy dared to face it. And these humans, they had killed it in minutes. And worse, they were eating it like a snack. One of the Queen's advisors stammered, "My Queen, this is unnatural. No species does this. No intelligent race eats apex predators." The Queen remained silent. Her claws dug into the armrests of her throne. A deep primal fear crawled through her mind. She had always thought humans were weak, that their fragile bodies and short lifespans made them insignificant, that their ability to adapt was nothing more than a nuisance. But now, she saw the truth. Humans were not weak. They were not prey. They were something far worse. They were the monsters. The transmission ended. The Queen took a deep breath. She turned to her generals, her voice steady but filled with dread. "Send word to all our forces," she commanded. "Do not engage the humans. Do not provoke them. Do not fight them." A general protested. "But my queen, they are nothing but—" The queen's eyes glowed with cold fire. "Do you not see?" she snapped. "They do not fear the greatest predator of our empire. They kill it. They eat it. And they laugh." The chamber fell into an eerie silence. For the first time in her long reign, the queen felt something she had never felt before. Terror. The human madness. The alien queen sat in silence. The grand chamber of her war council, once a place of loud debates and military strategy, was now filled with nothing but quiet, uneasy breathing. Her generals stood frozen, their mandibles twitching. The scientists clutched their data tablets like lifelines. The live transmission had ended, but the horror it revealed would never leave their minds. The humans had killed the Dreadfang. The humans had cooked the Dreadfang. The humans had eaten the Dreadfang. The queen's mind raced. She had studied countless species. She knew the natural order of things. Intelligent races did not eat apex predators. They feared them. They avoided them. They ran from them. But humans laughed in the face of death. Humans turned nightmares into meals. Her claws tapped against the throne's armrest. "I want a full investigation," she ordered, her voice sharp. "I want to know everything about human eating habits. How did they adapt to consuming creatures that should have killed them?" One of the HFY scientists stepped forward. He was an older member of her species, his exoskeleton darkened with age. His voice trembled as he spoke. "My queen," he said cautiously, "it is worse than we thought." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The scientist gulped and activated his data tablet. A hologram appeared, showing a list, a terrifying, impossible list. It was a record of everything humans had eaten across the galaxy. "Humans do not just eat animals from their homeworld," the scientist continued. "They consume creatures from every planet they set foot on. They do not stop at small prey. They hunt the strongest, the deadliest, the most venomous." The queen's mandibles clicked. "They eat them despite the danger." "No, my queen." The scientist's voice dropped to a whisper. "They eat them because of the danger." The queen felt her stomach tighten. The hologram shifted, displaying footage, not from the battlefield, but from human-controlled colonies across space. On the screen, a massive, six-legged predator from the ice world of Voltrex 9 lunged at a human soldier, its fangs dripped with venom capable of melting flesh. The human dodged, grinning. Moments later, his comrades surrounded the beast and brought it down with precision shots. The next clip showed a human chef on a live stream, standing next to the massive corpse of that very same predator. He was cutting its meat into thin slices, seasoning it with something called garlic butter. "Welcome back to Intergalactic BBQ," the human chef said cheerfully. "Today, we're making flame-grilled ice stalker steaks. Don't worry about the venom. Cooking neutralizes it, and the meat has a fantastic spicy kick." The HFY generals shuddered. The video switched to a different planet, a desert world. A monstrous sand leviathan, known for devouring entire warships, burst from beneath the dunes. Humans hunted it. Humans skinned it. Humans roasted its flesh over an open fire. The queen's grip on her throne tightened. "Stop." The hologram vanished. Silence filled the chamber once more. She turned to her warlords. "Do any of you still think these creatures are weak?" No one spoke. The queen exhaled slowly. "Tell me," she said, turning back to the scientist, "how does their biology allow this? How can their fragile bodies survive consuming so many different species?" The scientist hesitated. "That, my queen, is the most terrifying part." He tapped his screen, pulling up a diagram of the human digestive system. Their bodies are not just built for eating. They are built for adapting. If they consume something poisonous, they don't just die. Some of them survive. And the next time, Their kind learns how to neutralize the poison. They modify their food. They experiment with fire, spices, cooking methods. They do not fear toxins, acids, or natural defenses. They conquer them. The queen felt something she had not experienced in centuries. True, deep, primal fear. They are not like us, the scientist continued, his voice barely above a whisper. We avoid the dangers of the galaxy. They consume them. They turn threats into delicacies. They are insatiable. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then, suddenly, the doors to the chamber burst open. A breathless Xylath messenger stumbled inside, his exoskeleton gleaming with sweat. He fell to his knees before the queen. "My queen," he gasped. "Urgent report from the front lines." The queen's mandibles twitched. "Speak." The messenger's voice shook. "A Xylath warlord, General Korek, refused your orders. He ignored the warning and sent an army to attack a human-controlled planet." The queen's claws tapped the throne. And the messenger swallowed. His next words sent a chill through the chamber. The humans captured him. The queen's eyes widened. "Alive?" The messenger nodded. "Yes, my queen. But that is not the worst part." The entire room seemed to lean in. The messenger took a deep breath. His next words shattered the sanity of everyone present. The humans are not torturing him. They are feeding him. The queen's mind reeled. "What?" "They have him seated at a long table," the messenger continued. "They are making him eat with them. They are laughing, joking, offering him plates of cooked dreadfang meat. He refuses, but they are insisting. They are calling it a diplomatic dinner." The queen's claws trembled. The humans had taken a Xylath general, the most feared commander in their fleet, and turned him into a dinner guest. One of the warlords in the chamber hissed, "This is a humiliation, a mockery of our kind." The scientist, still holding his tablet, spoke softly. "No, it's worse than that." Everyone turned to him. He looked up, his expression blank with horror. This is how they conquer. They do not just destroy their enemies. They consume them. They break them. They make them part of their world, their culture, their food. The queen stared at the screen, where the last image of General Korek appeared, his terrified, confused face frozen in time as a human pushed a plate of steaming dreadfang ribs toward him. The words above the screen sent a final wave of dread through the room. "Welcome to Earth's first intergalactic food feast. Try our special to I meets." The queen's breath hitched. This was no ordinary enemy. This was the end of war itself. Because how do you fight an enemy who eats monsters like fast food? The failed warning. The queen's mind was in turmoil. The chamber remained silent except for the occasional nervous clicks and whispers of her warlords and advisors. The revelation had shaken them all. Humans were not warriors. They were something far worse. They did not just defeat their enemies. They absorbed them, turning nightmares into ingredients for their next meal. The queen closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The weight of the moment settled deep in her chest. Then she spoke, her voice commanding and absolute. "Send an urgent message to all Xylath fleets. Withdraw from all human-controlled planets. Do not engage them. Do not provoke them. Do not make contact." Her generals shifted uncomfortably. Some hesitated. Others lowered their gazes, unwilling to meet her many eyes. But one voice, deep and defiant, cut through the tension. "My queen, this is madness." The queen turned her gaze toward the speaker, General Zarka, Supreme Commander of the Xylath military forces, a powerful warrior. His exoskeleton was lined with battle scars. His reputation was built on centuries of conquest. He stepped forward, mandibles twitching in frustration. "We cannot retreat from these creatures. They are fragile. Their bodies are weak. Their lifespans are laughably short. And yet you wish for us to fear them." The queen did not blink. You saw the footage, General. Zarka clenched his fists. Yes, and I saw a few lucky humans kill a beast. That does not make them gods. It does not make them unstoppable. He turned to the rest of the chamber, his voice booming. Have we fallen so low that we would flee from these meat-eating savages? Some warlords grumbled in agreement. The queen could feel the tension rising. Zarka continued, his voice filled with venom. These creatures have spread across the stars like a plague. They think they can feast on our nightmares and claim dominance. No, I will not stand for this humiliation. The queen's eyes narrowed. And what do you propose? Zarka grinned, baring his sharp fangs. A show of force. We attack one of their colonies. Crush them before they become a threat. Teach them fear before they teach it to us. The queen studied him carefully. She had ruled for centuries. She had seen pride and overconfidence destroy many great warriors before. And yet, she could feel the doubt creeping into her own mind. Could Zarka be right? Were they overreacting? She turned to the scientist from before. What is the true strength of their forces? The scientist hesitated. Militarily, they are not the strongest. Their weapons are advanced, but not superior to ours. Their fleets are not larger than ours. But their minds, their adaptability, their ability to turn anything into a resource is what makes them truly dangerous. Zarka scoffed. They adapt? So do we. They eat monsters. Let them choke on them. He turned to the other warlords. I will lead the attack myself. I will wipe them out and bring their leader's head to this chamber. The queen's mind screamed a warning, but before she could speak, the warlords cheered. The chamber erupted in agreement. The decision was made. Zarka would lead the fleet to attack Gorthal IV, a human-controlled colony on the edges of their empire. The queen watched as the warlords filed out, preparing for war. She clenched her fists. She prayed she was wrong. Because if she wasn't, this would be their greatest mistake. The invasion of Gorthal IV. The Xylath fleet descended like a storm. Dozens of warships pierced through the sky, their weapons primed and ready. Gorthal IV was a human colony, a small one, barely fortified. Zarka stood at the command deck of his flagship, watching the blue-green planet below. This will be quick, he muttered. His fleet received no resistance. No planetary defenses activated. No counterattack came. No distress signals were sent. It was too easy. Zarka grinned. They don't even know we're here. He turned to his officers. Deploy the troops. No mercy. Drop pods launched from the warships, crashing into the surface below. Thousands of Xylath soldiers poured out, weapons raised, expecting a fight. But what they found was not a battlefield. It was a festival. The horror on the surface. Zarka stepped out of his landing craft, his eyes scanning the bizarre scene before him. The humans were laughing, not screaming, not running, not fighting. They were celebrating. Colorful banners hung between buildings. Large cooking fires burned in the open streets. Humans of all ages were gathered around long tables, eating, drinking, and sharing meals. Welcome to the Intergalactic Foodie Festival. A massive banner read. Zarka's mandibles twitched. What is this? One of his soldiers pointed toward a large central platform. General, look. At the center of the celebration was General Korak, the warlord who had been captured days ago. But he was not in chains. He was not being tortured. He was sitting at a table, surrounded by humans, eating a massive plate of meat. Zarka's claws curled. Impossible. Korak turned and saw them. His eyes widened in surprise. He wiped his mouth, stood up, and walked over. His exoskeleton looked healthier, his body stronger. General Zarka, he said, voice strangely calm. Zarka growled. What have they done to you? Korak sighed. They fed me. Zarka's fists tightened. You let them poison you. Korak laughed. No, you fool. They have shown me the truth. He gestured around him. We have spent centuries fighting, conquering, killing. And for what? Look at them. They do not hate us. They do not fear us. They welcomed me. They shared their food. Zarka stepped back in disgust. You are a traitor. No, Korak said firmly. I am free. The humans cheered, raising their drinks, their plates, their cooking utensils. Zarka realized too late. This was not an invasion. This was a trap. Because in that moment, his soldiers lowered their weapons. The smells of the cooking meat, the warmth of the fire, the laughter of the humans, it was infectious. His own troops were stepping forward, accepting plates of food. Zarka watched in horror as the Exilath ate, and as they ate, something changed inside them. They understood. The battle was already over. The humans had won, not with war, not with bloodshed, but with a feast. The empire trembles. The queen sat alone in the darkened chamber, her many eyes unfocused, her thoughts spiraling. She had felt it. The moment when General Zarka's fleet went silent. There had been no explosions, no distress signals, no desperate calls for reinforcements. Just nothing. A perfect, suffocating silence. A silence that was more terrifying than defeat. The chamber doors slid open, and a trembling advisor entered, his exoskeleton paler than before. He held a data tablet in shaking claws. My queen, he stammered. Whoa, we have received a transmission from General Zarka's forces. The queen straightened, her body tense. Play it. The advisor hesitated, then tapped the screen. A holographic projection flickered to life. General Zarka appeared, but he was not the same. His exoskeleton gleamed unnaturally, almost as if it had been polished. His once proud armor was missing, replaced by a simple fabric garment, human clothing. And his face was calm, peaceful. Zarka, the ruthless warlord who had once crushed entire civilizations, was now smiling. The queen's blood ran cold. Greetings, my queen, Zarka said, his voice steady and relaxed. I am here to deliver an important message. The queen clenched her fists. A hostage message. Torture. Mind control. Zarka continued. There was no battle. No war. No loss of life. The humans did something much worse. He exhaled slowly. They invited us to dinner. Murmurs filled the chamber. The queen's claws dug into her throne. Zarka leaned closer, his expression earnest. I know how this sounds, but it is the truth. They did not fight us. They welcomed us. They shared their food, their culture, their stories, and in return, we understood something we had never considered before. He held up a steaming plate of food, human food. This, he said, gesturing to the meal, is a dish called barbecue ribs, made from the flesh of the Dreadfang, the creature we once feared. The queen flinched. We believed humans were weak because they lacked claws, venom, or natural weapons. But we were wrong. Their strength is not in their bodies. He looked directly into the camera. Their strength is in their unity, their resilience, and above all, their food. The chamber erupted into horrified whispers. Zarka's voice softened. We have spent centuries conquering and destroying, but the humans have mastered something greater than war. They do not need to conquer by force. He took a bite of the food on his plate, chewed, and sighed in satisfaction. They conquer through taste. The screen went dark. The silence that followed was suffocating. The queen stood. Her movements sent a ripple of fear through the chamber. Where is the rest of the fleet? She demanded. The advisor hesitated. My queen, they have all defected. The queen's breath hitched. What? The advisor clutched the tablet tighter. They have abandoned their ranks. They have joined the humans. Reports indicate they are now participating in human customs. The queen's hands trembled. What customs? The advisor swallowed hard. cooking, eating, singing around fire pits. Some have even begun working in human restaurants. The warlords in the chamber gasped in horror. One warrior stepped forward, seething. This is a trick, a mind-controlling toxin. Humans must have drugged them. The scientist from before, still shaken, shook his head. No, it is worse. He activated another screen, footage from multiple Xylath-controlled worlds. Similar defections were happening everywhere. Xylath warriors, feared across the galaxy, were abandoning their posts. Not from defeat, not from fear, but from a desire to taste human food. One video showed an entire battalion of Xylath warriors lining up outside a human-run food stall, holding trays, eagerly waiting to be served. Another video displayed elite assassins, once the deadliest killers in the Empire, competing in a human hot wing eating contest. A final clip showed a warship captain broadcasting a message to his crew. "We surrender, but only if we get a seat at the feast." The Queen's heart pounded. It was spreading. This was not just about one fleet. This was about the entire Empire. Her warriors were not being beaten. They were being converted. By taste, by culture, by a force greater than war itself. The Queen's desperation. The Queen took a slow breath. She had never feared war. She had never feared enemies. But she feared this. She turned to her generals. "We must act before it's too late." One of the remaining warlords, his expression frantic, shook his head. "My queen, it is too late." He activated his own screen. More footage played. The humans were already moving, but not with fleets, not with weapons. They were sending restaurants. Massive, floating space stations designed as food hubs were appearing in orbit over Xylath colonies. Humans were not attacking. They were opening businesses. The Queen felt her stomach tighten. She knew, in her heart, that the war was already over. Because the moment those restaurants opened, her people, her warriors, her citizens, her empire would taste human food. And once they did, they would never go back. The beginning of the end. The Queen collapsed back into her throne. For centuries, she had ruled with absolute power, conquered worlds, crushed rebellions. But she had never faced an enemy like this. Because how do you fight an enemy that doesn't need to fight at all? She stared at the flashing reports, entire fleets defecting, warlords resigning, armies turning into chefs. Her empire was not being destroyed. It was being transformed. And in that moment, the Queen realized the terrible, horrifying truth. This was no longer a war. This was a dinner invitation. And the Xylath Empire had no choice but to RSVP, a desperate plan. The Queen sat in her private chamber, staring at the holographic map of the Xylath Empire, the empire she had spent centuries building, the empire she had ruled with absolute power. And it was crumbling. Not from war, not from rebellion, but from human food. Her mighty generals, her fearless warriors, her most devoted warlords, they were abandoning their posts, not for wealth or power, but for a seat at the humans' tables. Even now, she received reports of Xylath strongholds turning into food markets. Military barracks converted into restaurants, where warriors once trained but now competed in spicy food challenges. She closed her eyes, willing herself to think, to find a way out of this nightmare. There had to be a way. She could not allow her empire to fall, not like this. Not to grilled meat. Her claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest of her throne. Then her eyes snapped open. There was one last option. A desperate, dangerous, reckless option. But if she did nothing, then within months, maybe even weeks, that Xylath Empire would cease to exist. She activated her personal communicator, summoned the High Council. "We are launching a counter-offensive." The plan: starve the humans. The High Council of the Xylath Empire gathered in the war chamber, each warlord looking more desperate than the last. Most of them had lost entire fleets, not to battle, but to food stalls and buffet tables. The queen wasted no time. We cannot outfight them. We cannot match their ability to convert our people, but we can still win. The warlords leaned forward, listening intently. We will cut off their food supply. A murmur spread through the chamber. We have made a mistake, the queen continued. We have treated humans as warriors, but they are not. They are not conquerors. They are not invaders. They are chefs. She slammed a clawed fist onto the table, and like any species that relies on food, they have a weakness. If we control that food, we control them. The plan was simple: destroy human supply chains, sabotage their farms, blockade their food shipments. If the humans could not spread their culinary influence, then the HFY Empire could regain control. This is how we will fight back, the queen declared. Not with warships, not with armies, but with starvation. The warlords nodded, their desperation turning into determination. For the first time in weeks, the queen felt something close to hope. Maybe, just maybe, the humans could be stopped. The blockade begins. Tylath warships took their positions across human space, establishing strict food blockades. Cargo ships carrying earth-grown spices, sauces, and meats were intercepted. Farms on human colonies were raided. Entire planets were cut off from food supplies. The HFY Empire was no longer fighting humans with weapons. They were fighting them with hunger. For days, there was silence from the human colonies. No transmissions, no responses. The queen waited, believing she had finally gained the upper hand. Then, a new report arrived. The humans had responded, but not with war, not with violence, with something far worse. The humans adapt, again. The queen watched the transmission in horror. A human scientist stood in front of a laboratory filled with blinking machines and vats of bubbling liquid. He was wearing a white coat, and a strange human grin stretched across his face. So, fun fact, the scientist said, we noticed someone's been cutting off our food supply. A little annoying, sure, but guess what? The camera panned to a massive factory where dozens of humans were working. Machines hummed, steam hissed, artificial meat fats churned. We already saw this coming, the scientist continued cheerfully. So we decided to prepare. Welcome to the future of food. Lead grown in meat. Tastes the same, cooks the same, but made entirely from synthetic proteins. No need for farms. No need for supply chains. Just endless, delicious food. The transmission cut to human chefs, testing the lab-grown meat, nodding in approval. Oh, and one more thing, the scientist added. Since we had to rethink our approach, we also made a few improvements. The new version of Dreadfang steak. Yeah, we made it even more flavorful. Spicier, juicier. You're welcome. The screen flickered off. The queen's claws trembled. The warlords stared in disbelief. They didn't starve, one of them whispered. They improved their food instead. Another warlord collapsed into his chair. They don't need supply chains anymore. They can just make food anywhere. The queen's heart pounded. Her final, desperate plan had failed. The humans had adapted. Again. And worse, their food was now more powerful than ever. The breaking point. The queen received a final transmission that night. It was from a Xylath colony on the Empire's capital planet. She played the video, and her blood ran cold. Xylath civilians, millions of them, were marching in the streets. But they were not rioting. They were chanting, "We want flavor. We want spices. We wanted human food." The queen's claws dug into her throne. No, this cannot be happening. A Xylath citizen appeared on screen, holding a homemade sign written in human language. It read, "If we see and have Earth food, we will make our own." And then the final blow landed. The screen switched to a massive underground facility where HFY scientists, her own scientists, had started their own black market food production. They were learning human cooking techniques. They were recreating human recipes. They were stealing human food culture and making it their own. The queen stood up so fast that her chair shattered behind her. She turned to her warlords. Her once mighty empire had made its choice, and the choice was not war. It was dinner. Her empire was lost. Not through invasion, not through force, but because her people had tasted human food, and they would never settle for anything less ever again. Her vision blurred. Her claws curled, and for the first time in her long, ruthless reign, the queen knew she had lost. The last mistake. The queen sat motionless in her throne, her claws gripping the armrests so tightly that deep cracks formed in the obsidian-like material. Her empire, her immortal, unconquerable empire, was collapsing not through war, but through flavor. Her people, once feared as ruthless conquerors, were chanting for human food in the streets. Her warriors, once the finest soldiers in the galaxy, were lining up at human food stalls instead of battle formations. Her scientists, once dedicated to developing new weapons of war, were perfecting barbecue techniques and debating spice combinations. It was over. And yet, she refused to accept it. She was the queen of the HFY Empire. She had conquered countless worlds, crushed entire civilizations, turned stars into weapons. She would not, could not, allow her reign to end like this. Her mandibles twitched. There had to be a way. Then, slowly, a new thought began to form in her mind. What if humans had weaknesses? What if their love of food could be used against them? Her 6 glowing eyes flickered with new determination. They had one last chance. One final opportunity to reclaim their power. And this time, she would not fail. The final plan. Poison the feast. The queen's plan was elegant in its simplicity. If humans won battles through taste, then the HFY would turn that taste into a weapon. They would infiltrate human supply chains. They would introduce subtle, undetectable poisons into key ingredients. Meats, sauces, spices. And then, when the humans consumed their beloved food, they would fall. It would not kill them instantly. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, it would act slowly, weakening their bodies, dulling their senses, eroding their ability to fight back. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late. The queen summoned her most loyal spies, agents who had not yet been seduced by human food, and issued her command. Begin immediately. Do not fail me. The agents vanished into the shadows, heading toward human space. The queen allowed herself a rare smile. This was it. The last, perfect checkmate. And this time, humanity would not escape. The humans' response. The unthinkable days passed. Then weeks. The queen waited, expecting to hear reports of humans falling ill, of weakness spreading through their forces, of defections slowing down as her people realized that human food was no longer safe. But then, something strange happened. Instead of reports of panic, she received a transmission from a human chef. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grinning, round-faced human standing in a massive kitchen. The background was bustling with activity, hundreds of chefs moving at lightning speed, chopping, stirring, and tasting. "Hey there, HFY Empire," the human said cheerfully. "We've noticed something funny going on with our ingredients lately. Thought we'd give you a little update." The queen leaned forward, her claws tightening. The chef lifted a small vial of dark liquid. "This," he said, shaking the vial. "We found this in our spice shipments. Turns out, someone tried to slip in a little surprise. A slow-acting poison designed to weaken us over time." The queen's breath caught in her throat. They knew. The chef grinned. "Clever plan. Really, hats off to you guys." Then his smile grew even wider. "Good, you forgot one thing. He reached off-screen and pulled something into view. It was a massive glowing machine, humming with power. "We humans," he said, patting the machine, "test everything we eat. Every shipment, every ingredient, every spice. You think we don't check? That we don't analyze every single molecule that enters our stomachs? Food is our greatest passion, our greatest weapon. We protect it with our lives." He flicked a switch, and the machine lit up, scanning the vial in his hand. "Your poison. Neutralized before it even hit a single plate." The queen's claws dug into her throne. "Impossible. Impossible." The chef shrugged. "But hey, we get it. You're desperate. You want to win. So here's what we're gonna do." He leaned closer to the camera. "We've decided to return the favor." The queen's heart stopped. "We improved your food." The chamber erupted into chaos. The warlord screeched in horror as the screen shifted, showing HFY kitchens across the empire. Human chefs were there, infiltrating their restaurants, training their cooks, perfecting their recipes. New dishes were already spreading through HFY worlds. Dishes that were more addictive than anything the HFY had ever tasted before. Flavors they could not resist. And the humans, they were giving it away for free. "Enjoy," the chef said, winking at the screen. "No need for war. Just a taste. Once you try it, you'll never go back." The transmission ended. Silence fell over the queen's chamber. She knew. It was over. The fall of the HFY empire. The queen tried to resist. She banned human food. She issued strict orders. She executed those who defied her. It didn't matter. Her people had tasted something better. And once they had, they refused to live without it. HFY worlds fell, not to human fleets, but to human chefs. Cities transformed into culinary hubs. Warlords traded their weapons for aprons. Even her own elite guards abandoned their posts to work in human-owned restaurants. The queen was the last to hold out, alone, in her dark, empty palace, until the day she finally gave in. A single plate of earth-made dreadfang steak was delivered to her throne room. She stared at it for hours. Then, slowly, she picked up a piece, brought it to her mouth, and took one bite. Her eyes widened. Her mandibles trembled. The flavor was indescribable. And in that moment, she finally understood. The HFY empire had not been defeated. It had been evolved. It had been conquered by taste. And the queen, she was just another guest at the feast. The queen's final choice. The taste lingered on her tongue, richer and more complex than anything she had ever consumed. It was not merely food. It was an experience, a revelation, a final message from the humans. You never stood a chance. The queen sat in silence, her claws resting on the now empty plate before her. Around her, the once grand war chamber of the HFY empire lay in ruin, not from battle, but from abandonment. Her warlords were gone. Her advisors had vanished. Her elite guards had left their posts, lured away by the call of human cuisine. She was alone. For centuries, she had ruled with an iron fist. Her empire had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and instilled fear in the hearts of countless civilizations. The HFY were supposed to be eternal, a dominant force across the stars. And yet here she sat, not defeated by war, but by flavor, by spices, by fire-grilled meats, by a species that turned their enemies into dinner guests. Her mandibles twitched in frustration. This was insanity. Her empire had not been burned or bombed. It had been marinated and slow-cooked to perfection. She stared at her reflection in the polished plate before her. What was left for a queen without an empire? The human invitation. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime, a transmission request. She hesitated, then reached out, activating the holographic display. The face of a human appeared, a middle-aged man with bright eyes, wearing a pristine white uniform. Behind him, The bustling sounds of a restaurant kitchen echoed. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of cooking meat, the laughter of both humans and HFY chefs working side by side. "Ah, Your Majesty. Finally. I was wondering when you'd answer." Her claws clenched. "Who are you?" The human smiled. "I am Chef Marco Velez, head of the Galactic Culinary Council." "The what?" "Oh, we're an interstellar organization focused on food diplomacy. Our goal is to unite the galaxy through shared cuisine. And well," he gestured at her empty plate, "I see you've already had your first taste." The queen felt insulted, and yet, also, intrigued. She exhaled slowly. "If you are here to mock me, you are wasting your time." Marco shook his head. "Oh, no. Quite the opposite, actually." He leaned forward, his grin widening. "I'm here to offer you a job." The queen froze. "Excuse me?" Marco chuckled. "Look, Your Majesty, we both know the war is over. Your people have made their choice. They don't want to conquer anymore. They want to eat, cook, experiment with flavors, and share meals with new species." Her claws tapped against the table. "And what does this have to do with me?" Marco shrugged. "You have two options, really." He held up one finger. "Option 1. You refuse to adapt. You stay here alone, watching as your empire turns into a foodie paradise, resenting the fact that we humans beat you without ever firing a shot." The queen scowled. "And option 2. Marco grinned, holding up a second finger. "You join us." The queen blinked. "You bring the HFY culinary traditions into the next era. You help us create new recipes, experiment with new alien ingredients, and build the greatest intergalactic food empire the universe has ever seen. You become a part of history, not as a ruler of war, but as a ruler of taste." The queen scoffed. "You think I would trade my throne for a kitchen?" Marco's grin never faltered. "It's not a kitchen, Your Majesty. It's an empire of flavor." The queen stared at him, feeling a deep, sinking dread, because she realized, in that moment, she had already lost. And humans, they had already won. Not through destruction, not through invasion, through something far more irresistible, through taste. The birth of the first galactic culinary empire. Years passed. The HFY no longer waged war. Their fleets, once instruments of terror, had been converted into mobile food markets, traveling from planet to planet, introducing their own unique spices and flavors to the galaxy. Their feared battle stations became culinary academies, where alien species learned the secrets of both HFY and human cooking techniques. The queen was no longer a queen. She was now Master Chef Tarvax, Supreme Culinary Director of the Galactic Food Federation. She ruled not with fear, but with flavor. And humanity. They had done the impossible. They had ended war, not through force, but through food. For the first time in recorded history, civilizations across the galaxy no longer fought each other. They competed, not with weapons, but with recipes. The intergalactic war had become the intergalactic cooking competition. And at the heart of it all, standing side by side in a bustling, multi-species kitchen, humans and HFY worked together, united not by conquest, but by the universal power of food. Because in the end, there was one truth that all species had to accept. No matter where you come from, no matter what planet you call home, everyone loves a good meal. And humans, they had simply perfected it. Epilogue. The Queen's last words. In her private office, Tarvax, the former queen of the HFY, sat at her desk, writing her memoirs. She titled them, "From War to Flavor: How I Was Conquered by a Barbecue." She chuckled to herself. What a ridiculous fate. She picked up a plate of spicy grilled dreadfang ribs, took a bite, and sighed. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad fate after all.